Good evening, YouTube. So I had said that I was going to share my story, and I've been thinking about doing this for a while because I feel like with the world today and how prevalent drugs like fentanyl and methamphetamines and heroin. I mean, in terms of methamphetamines, there's a lot of kids on Adderall, and it's terrifying. And so I feel like by sharing my story, I could help a lot of people, and especially those who have reached a point in their addiction that they have hit such a hard bottom that they want to change. That is genuinely what they want. So, let me start by saying I was raised under a Christian background. I was raised with morals and standards that you live by, rules, just a common decency that you're supposed to live by. And I mean, I never thought bad of that. I always thought that that was a good thing. um my grandparents took me to church, and I never questioned the existence of God. I always just knew that he existed. um there was never a question there for me. And to those of you out there that don't believe, that's fine. That is fine. I don't judge you for that at all. I know that Christians over the years have been given a bad name to a lot of people who call themselves Christians that live completely opposite, like hypocritical, and they preach hellfire to all that do not see things as they see them. And that's not a good way to be. I believe that that's actually the worst possible way you can be. Because anybody that believes in God also knows that God is a very loving, forgiving God, and that He's working throughout your lifetime, perfecting what He started when you were born. But I don't want to get too far off track. So I started very early. I took pain pills for the first time when I was 14 years old. I went to my grandparents for the summer down in lower Alabama near Gulf Shores. And my grandmother had a prescription of morphine. And I knew what painkillers were. And I had always heard that they were great. So my mind immediately went to, well, let's try it. And I did. And I immediately fell in love. I felt like that was what I should feel like at all times. I felt like I had found the answer to happiness. And what I didn't realize at the time was the road that something like that can take you down, and that the happiness that you felt was false. It was a false happiness. Um, so I started early. I got addicted immediately. It wasn't a matter of take it, put it down, go away for a few years. I immediately fell in love with the sensation and the euphoria that opiates bring on. So when I went home for the summer, my grandparents actually found out that I had taken them. And that was the first experience I had with a burnt bridge due to drug abuse. Um, which later on, things were solved and everything was okay. But at the time, that was a first experience for me. But I started high school, and I started with the knowledge that I liked opiates. Now, I, of course, had been smoking weed for a while, but marijuana, eh, I don't, I'm sorry, but marijuana is Nobody has died from it, and I just don't believe that it's addictive. I believe that people want to smoke, and I believe that sometimes it's hard to give it up due to the fact, but you're never going to find somebody putting a gun in somebody's face at a pharmacy or robbing a liquor or gas station for marijuana. You'll never, and if so, that person has a lot more issues than just marijuana use. But as for opiates, you do. You see people that rob gas stations, liquor stores, even murder people for a bottle of pills. Now, fast forward to high school, I started buying Lortabs, Roxycodone, Oxycodone, Opana, Oxymorphone. I started buying all of it. I genuinely liked all of it. And the stronger, the better. And that was how it was for a couple years. And with the pain pills, I was able to maintain. I was able to keep a sense of normalcy. And through that time period, I never had to experience dope sickness or anything of the sort. Now, fast forward to 17. That was when, one night specifically, I had been running with a guy that was 26 when I was 17. Red flag. I know now that that's absolutely weird, but at the time, I didn't think anything of it, which he strictly was hanging around me because I had money and he could get a free high off of it. But one night we were on the way to get Roxycodone, and he said that the dealer didn't have any Roxycodone, but that he knew where we could get something that was cheaper and a lot better. Okay, all for it. Well, that substance turned out to be heroin. And I wonder sometimes why my mind at that point didn't bring things to a sudden halt. But it didn't. I was all for it, and we got some. I took it home. I didn't know much about it, so I just kind of started small and went up. But when I got that first rush from heroin, I was hooked, and I was immediately sent forth on a speeding train with no brakes, and I didn't know it. At this time, I didn't know anything about dope sickness. I didn't know anything about the sheer unhumanity of drug addiction. And I want people out there to understand who may have family members going through this or who just genuinely don't understand. Initially, yes, drug addicts like myself, well, I'm a recovering drug addict, but people like me could have initially said no. That's true. But what y'all don't understand is imagine having a leash around your neck with someone very strong in charge of that leash. And no matter how hard you pulled to get away, they constantly jerked the leash and pulled you right back to them. That is what drug addiction is like. And especially with heroin, due to the fact that you get dope sickness, it's 10 times worse. So it didn't take long starting to use heroin before I moved to a needle. And for those of you who are heroin addicts or are recovering heroin addicts, you know that when you move to a needle, things happen very quickly. You go downhill very quickly. And that was the case with me. I would spend every dime I had, hundreds of dollars every day. And when I would run out of money, I would do what I had to do. Now, I don't mean killing anybody or anything like that, but luckily, I'll put it this way. Luckily, I made it through without any serious charges or stuff like that. But what I didn't make it through with was good mental health and the fact that I almost died multiple times. So, the first time I experienced dope sickness, I had no clue what was going on. I had bought my last little bit, and this was the first time that I did not have money to get more until the next day. And 4 hours later, started to feel like I was getting the flu, but something was different about it. It was such a sense of I couldn't stand to be in my skin that it was enough to drive someone insane. And it was intense, and I didn't understand. I didn't understand at all. I almost went to the emergency room because I just didn't understand. But I had talked to some friends and found out that that was dope sickness. So, of course, I found a way to get some dope and realized that the dope took it away. So, for the next long while, I battled with spending every dime I had to get dope. And at this point, it wasn't even about the high. It was from keeping myself from getting sick and spending days in writhing pain and agony. And when I tell you that dope sickness is the most awful thing that I have ever experienced, and I think that you can experience, you cannot begin to imagine unless you have experienced it yourself. And many times I told myself that I was done, but as soon as the dope sickness and the cravings kicked in, there I was. And I would sit there in my car and cry as I injected myself with heroin because I was so defeated and I was so upset with myself and just baffled at the position that I was in. I prayed, I cried, I could not break loose of it. I lost a relationship that was an engagement. I lost family, friends. I ended up alone, completely 100% alone. Many nights I would wake up in my car covered in sweat with no clue how long I had been out or where I was at. And I knew, so it came down to a point where I had became so dwindled down to nothing but a hollow shell that I only had one identity, and that was heroin. I had lost every sense of self. I had lost every bit of determination, sense of self, sense of confidence, motivation. Heroin had basically took me and wrung me out till I had nothing. And the feeling of being trapped in something like that, feeling like you have nowhere to go, I can't explain that. I cannot explain that, and when I think of it, I want to cry. And when I think of others going through it, it eats my lunch. So one night, it had gotten so bad that I would leave my house and drive all the way downtown knowing I was going to run out of gas on the way back. And I was having to call people to bring me gas cans just about every time. And the last time I ran out of gas, I had shot that last bit of dope and started getting sick as I was pushing my car off the interstate. And I went home, and I needed money. And I tried to, as calmly as I could, because at this point nobody knew for sure what I was doing. In my family, they just knew that I was going crazy. My mom had nothing left to give. She had given me all the money she had. And I just freaked out and just started screaming, I'm sick, I'm sick. And she didn't understand. And I finally told her that I was using heroin and that I needed help. And the look on her face, hearing her son say that, that's just something that I will never forget. Something that I can't forget. And it's one of the images that keeps me from going back, is watching my mother collapse on the inside. And I was so bad off that even after telling her that, I made her overdraft her account so I could go get one more hit of dope. So at 18 years old, I told my mother that I was a heroin addict. I wasn't even out of high school yet. And the next day I went to rehab. And I did a very intense 10 days of detox. When I got out, I flew out to Palm Springs, California, to a place called Michael's house. I did as much time as I could out there before I got up and left. I left and I went to the airport with no money and basically told my family that either fly me back or not hear from me again at that point. I had turned into a very selfish, impulsive, out of it person. And they flew me back, and I was sent to my grandparents, the same grandparents that I had taken the morphine from all those years ago. And I went through 2 years of them trying to fix me, seeing psychiatrists, doing a Suboxone program that I was on for 2 years, which you shouldn't even be on Suboxone for more than maybe a couple days or weeks, excuse me. And being there with a psychiatrist and Suboxone, I ended up on more drugs than when I was buying them on the street. I had 3 different kinds of benzos, Adderall, I was taking Suboxone. I was mixing things that are black box, but my doctor was giving them to me. So my mind, I can handle this. I can cruise with this as long as I'm getting them from a doctor, whatever. I tried everything I could to keep drugs in my life, but manage and do it in moderation. I'm here to tell you that if you're a drug addict, I'm sorry. You can't have both. You can't have drugs and a life. You're going to end up in 2 places eventually, just like so many of my friends have. You're either going to end up in the graveyard or you're going to end up in prison. There is no in between. And in those 2 years that I lived with them, I hit a bottom in myself that I never would have ever thought possible. I dwindled down to a place where I was nothing. I was nothing. Just in a place of sheer, I don't know. And during that 2 years, I was going to church. And I just couldn't I couldn't get away from it. It got so bad, even living there, where I was breaking their safe open just to get some pills. I would take them and then tell them I broke their safe open and that they were going to have to buy another lock. I did that multiple times. But finally, I reached such a bottom that I either wanted to get help and truly get better, or I didn't want to be here no more. But me being me, I had to get help. And I ended up going to a place called Bradford Health in Warrior, Alabama. And guys, that was the biggest blessing I'll ever know. I went to Bradford and did a 27-day detox. And I made the best choice I ever made to go home or go to a place called ALR. ALR. I know the meaning of it, and I'm having a brain fart right now. I'll remember it in a second, but the short was ALR, and it was in Bessemer, Alabama, which was weird because it was in the straight up ghetto of Bessemer. We had literally had trap and crack houses all around us, but it was the best community of guys. It saved my life. It was there that I grew into a man. It was there where I changed so fast, so abruptly, and I put myself together. And it's been 8 years, and I'm still climbing. Now, don't get me wrong. I still struggle every day because I'm also a Christian. And through my teenage years and my early 20s, I really lost myself. And it's taking time for me to do away with habits and things that I've just developed over the years. But I talk to God every day, and I'm trying. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying. And I know what I want. I know the man I want to be. And I will work hard until I'm not here no more. So for those out there who you may not even be, a drug addict, this can resonate with young Christians that through their teens and early 20s really got separated and fell down the wormhole that this world tends to put you in nowadays. I mean, at 14 years old, you can get online and watch grown people have sex. You can watch just about anything with nothing stopping you. You have sites for sexual things. You can order drugs online. It's a good time, but it can be a really bad time. And young kids, unfortunately, can start out innocent and develop habits that really take them to some dark places. So for young Christians, that I still go through periods where I feel so unworthy of forgiveness. I feel like I can't be forgiven due to my mistakes. I go through periods where I really struggle, but I continue to talk to God, and I continue to try, and I just continue. And that's the big thing, is keeping on. Recovery for drug addiction mainly has to do with community. It has to do with taking the steps to replace drugs with purpose, replace drugs with community. When you become a part of recovery, the fact that you are helping others, that you are speaking in meetings, that you're going to sober livings and rehabs and sharing your experience, the fact that you are sponsoring and helping, that replaces the drugs. That becomes a high in itself. And everybody thinks that when they leave drugs behind, that life gets boring. And I'm here to tell you that some of the best years of my life were in early recovery. Those first few years were some of the best years of my life. And I'll never forget some of the memories I made stone cold sober. I just wanted to share that with you guys. I appreciate all who have subscribed to my channel. I would like to continue making videos and content and helping and all that. And if you would like for me to do that, subscribe and just let me know. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm an open book, and I like talking to people. I like meeting new people. I like making friends. But I appreciate y'all taking the time to listen to this. And for those of you who are struggling either with drug addiction or just being a young Christian that got away from things and really just fell off, I promise you, you can return. You can come back home, come back into the fold. One thing I do know is God loves us unconditionally, because if he didn't, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be changing in the ways that I am every day. I appreciate you guys, and I hope y'all have a wonderful evening.